The Socio-Spatial Dialectic by Edward Soja addresses a growing problem within Marx's spatial analysis: the tendency to limit or dismiss the importance of space and geography in understanding capitalism. Marxist scholars have become too rigid in their thinking about space, treating it merely as a reflection of social relations rather than as something that actively shapes and is shaped by those relations. This rigidity threatens to prevent the development of a truly critical theory of space. Soja introduces the concept of the socio-spatial dialectic as a way to understand the relationship between social and spatial structures. These two dimensions are not separate but are dialectically interconnected. Social relations of productions are both shaped by space and shape space in return. This is not about asking which causes which, but about understanding their mutual influence and interdependence. The article begins by examining how Marxist scholars responded to the work of Henri Lefebvre, a French philosopher who gave great importance to space and urbanism in understanding modern capitalism. Lefebvre argued that capitalism survived by producing space, and the urban revolution was as important as industrial revolution. Spatial conflicts could be as significant as class conflicts in bringing about social change. David Harvey and Manuel Castells, two prominent Marxist geographers, praised Lefebvre's insights but ultimately rejected his conclusions. They felt Lefebvre went too far by giving space too much independence and importance. They worried that focusing on spatial conflicts would distract from class struggle, which they saw as the fundamental driver of social change. Lefebvre was accused of fetishizing space, treating it as something autonomous rather than as an expression of social relations. Soja argues that this reaction was misguided. Harvey and Castells misunderstood Lefebvre by forcing him into a false choice. Either space is a separate structure with its own laws, or it is merely an expression of social relations. Soja proposes a third option. Space is neither separate nor merely reflective, but dialectically intertwined with social relations. Soja makes an important distinction between two kinds of space. The first is contextual space, the physical, natural space that exists independently of human activity. The second is socially produced space or spatiality, the organized, meaningful space that humans create through their activities. This includes cities, regions, territories, transportation networks, and the uneven distribution of resources and populations. Marxist analysis has often confused these two types of space, treating organized space as if it were merely natural or given, rather than as a social product. When we talk about social space, we should mean the space that is created, organized, and given meaning through human social practice. This space is not neutral or natural, it is political and ideological, filled with the traces of past struggles and serving present interests. Soja identifies three approaches to understanding the relationship between organized space and the capitalist mode of production. The first approach, represented by Lefebvre and Ernest Mandel, sees spatial relations as having significant transformative potential comparable to class relations. Spatial structures like the division between centers and peripheries are as fundamental to capitalism as the exploitation of labor by capital. The second approach, held by orthodox Marxists, insists that spatial structures are merely superstructure reflections of more fundamental social relations of production. They believe that traditional class analysis must remain central, and any emphasis on space is revisionist and dangerous. The third approach, represented by scholars like Harvey, Castells, and Immanuel Wallerstein, falls somewhere in between. These scholars make important contributions to understanding spatial structures, but ultimately back away from the implications of their own analysis. They treat from fully embracing the socio-spatial dialectic because of fear of being accused of spatial fetishism. Soja examines how these debates play out specifically in urban analysis. Marxist urban scholars have argued that in advanced capitalism, the city has become crucial not just for production but also for consumption and the reproduction of labor power. The state increasingly intervenes in urban space to manage crisis and maintain social order. Conflicts over housing, public services, and urban development have become important sites of class struggle. Critics have accused these urban scholars for focusing too much on consumption and not enough on production, and of creating a new urban sociology that departs from proper Marxist analysis. Soja defends the emphasis on consumption and reproduction, but by pointing out that Marx himself viewed production and consumption as dialectically related moments of the same process. Surplus value must be realized through exchange and consumption. It cannot remain abstract. The transformation of capitalism has increasingly revolved around both a social and a spatial struggle. Workers must fight not just at the point of production, but also in their communities and living spaces. The class struggle has become a two-front war involving both wage-based and consumption-based conflicts. Soja debates about finance capital, the capital involved in banking, real estate, and financial speculation rather than direct industrial production. Lefebvre argued that finance capital has become increasingly important in realizing surplus value through manipulation of the built environment, urban rent, and collective consumption. Critics accused him of suggesting that finance capital had replaced industrial capital as the dominant force in capitalism. Soja clarifies that Lefebvre was not saying that finance capital creates surplus value, only that an increasing proportion of surplus value is realized through finance capital activities. Under competitive capitalism, the organization of urban space for production and consumption could be left largely to market forces. Under monopoly capitalism, however, the state and finance capital must intervene to reorganize urban space, expand collective consumption, and manage class conflict. The same debates about spatial fetishism appear in regional and international analysis. Scholars who emphasize center-periphery relations and uneven geographical development are accused of diverting attention from class struggle. Soja defends these scholars by arguing that uneven geographical development is not merely an outcome of capitalism, but a necessary condition for its survival. Capitalism creates and maintains regional inequalities to provide labor reserves, complementary markets, and sources of super profits. The dialectical tension between differentiation and equalization drives the process of geographically uneven development. The center-periphery structure is homologous to class structure. Both arise from the same fundamental contradictions between capital and labor. Soja acknowledges that some dependency theorists have indeed overstated their case, treating spatial exploitation as if it replaced rather than complemented class exploitation. This does not justify dismissing the importance of spatial structures. The geographical transfer of value from peripheral regions to central regions is a real mechanism that sustains capitalism and must be understood. Soja concludes by calling for the re-inclusion of socially produced space in Marxist analysis as more than an epiphenomenon. The socio-spatial dialectic should be understood as a productive framework for analyzing capitalist social formations and for guiding social action. This does not mean submerging class analysis or treating space as autonomous from social relations. Rather, it means recognizing that social relations are simultaneously spatial and the division of labor has both social and territorial dimensions.